Northern Norway is the geographical region of Norway, consisting of the three northernmost counties Nordland, Troms and Finnmark, in total about 35% of the Norwegian mainland. Some of the largest towns in northern Norway are Rana, Bodø, Narvik, Harstad, Tromsø and Alta. Northern Norway is often described as the land of the midnight sun and the land of the northern lights. Further north, halfway to the North Pole, is the Arctic archipelago of Svalbard, traditionally not regarded as part of northern Norway. The region is multicultural, housing not just Norwegians but also the indigenous Sami people, Norwegian Finns and Russian populations. The Norwegian language dominates in most of the area. Sami speakers are mainly found inland and in some of the fjord areas of Nordland, Troms and particularly Finnmark. Though ethnic Sami who do not speak the language are found more or less everywhere in the region. Finnish is spoken in only a few communities in the east of Finnmark. Geography. Northern Norway covers about a third of Norway. The southernmost part, roughly the part south of the Arctic Circle, is called Helgeland. Here there is a multitude of islands and skerries on the outside of the coastal range, some flat, some with impressive shapes, like Mount Torfaten, which has a hole through it, and the Seven Sisters near Sandnesjøen. The inland is covered with dense spruce forests and mountains near the Swedish border. Some of the biggest rivers in the region are the Vefsna and the Rana. The highest mountain in northern Norway is found here in the Økstinden range south of Mo I Rana, with Økskolten reaching 1,915 meters above sea level, and with the glacier Økstindbræen. The Saltlet range, with its Svartisen glacier and intersecting Arctic Circle, divides Helgeland from the next region, called Salten. Notable peaks in Salten are the Baravastinden south of Bodø, Suliskumgen near Forsk, the Stigartinden and the Fallikhamarotinden. Between Saltlet and eastern Finnmark, Norway spruce trees have originally been planted and are mostly privately owned. The older plantations are now producing lumber, 80 years after planted. Lofoten is a chain of peaks that jut out of the ocean. From the mainland side it looks very barren, but behind the violet-black peaks there are also flatlands with good grazing for sheep, partially on soil made from seaweed. The Vesteraalen Islands consist of smaller and bigger islands with a huge variation in landscape. Lofoten, further inland, is a fjord landscape with high mountains. The highest is Steinlet in Narvik, 1,894 m above sea level, but the most well-known is Stitind, the national mountain of Norway. There are also glaciers, like Frostisen and Blåjenisen. Troms County has surprising greenery for the latitude, and the inner waterways and fjords are lined with birch forests, and further inland there are extensive pine forests and highlands around the rivers Marjenalselva and Risaelva. Big islands like Senja, Kvaløya and Ringvassøya have green, forested interiors and a barren, mountainous coastline, with smaller islands offshore. The Lingan Alps are the highest mountains of the area, rising to 1,833 meters, an area of glaciers and waterfalls. The 269 meters Molsfossen waterfall in Nordreisa is the highest waterfall in the north, while Marjenalselvossen is Norway's national waterfall. Finnmark County has fjords and glaciers in the far southwest, and the northwestern coasts are characterized by big islands, like Zarøya and Sealand. The inland is covered by Finnmark's Vidda, a relatively barren plateau about 300 to 400 meters high, with many lakes and rivers like Altakortokano and Tanadetnu. Even at this latitude, pine forests grow naturally in lowland areas inland. East of Onnesfjord, there are no islands protecting the barren coasts that rise directly up from the sea. The landscape towards the Russian border is comparatively flat. Knivskjelodden on the island of Majorøya marks the northern end of Europe. Tourism is directed to the much more accessible North Cape, whereas Kinnarodden on the Nordkinn Peninsula is the northernmost point of Europe's mainland. Finnmark is situated north of northernmost Finland, and to the east Norway has a 196 km border with Russia. History. The oldest known historical culture in the region is called Kumsa, named after a mountain in Alta. The first people possibly arrived around 13,000 years ago. but it is uncertain whether they came from southern Norway or from the Kola Peninsula. Today the rock carvings at Troms and Alta or at Lens in Nordland are among the remainders of the Stone Age cultures, showing reindeer swimming across the fjords. A significant find area is between the river Tana and the fjord of Varanger, where the reindeer probably ran over the isthmus on the way between the winter and summer grazing. The question of the ethnic identity of the Stone Age cultures is politically charged, as many Sámi feel the uncertainty surrounding the earliest settlers in northern Norway is being used to question their status as an indigenous people. Metals were introduced around 500 BC. The Sámi culture can be traced back at least 2,000 years. There is also some archaeological evidence of Bronze Age agricultural settlements about 2,500 years old, as in Stiergen and Zamna. In 2009, archaeologists discovered evidence of barley grown in Kvarf Fjord near Harstad in the Bronze Age 1000 BC. A larger settlement by people of Germanic origin, with substantial archaeological evidence, seemed to have occurred around 200–300 AD. These settled along the coasts roughly up to Tromsø. The two ethnic groups traded with each other, and there seems to have been quite a lot of intermarriage. The nature of the coexistence is still being hotly debated. In the Viking Age, several chieftains along the coast played a significant role in Norwegian history, usually resisting unification of Norway. The voyage and story of Ottar from Hayenlog was recorded by the King of England. Hayenrek from Tjartita and Torhund, who killed Saint Olaf at the Battle of Stiklestad in 1030, were important leaders according to Heimskringla. The chieftain and poet Øyvind Skaldsspiller was the first to receive international acclaim, as his poems were awarded when the Icelandic parliament organized a money collection to buy him a thick ring of gold. This flourishing period of resistance was followed by consolidation and centralization of the Norwegian state, which was dominated by southerners, reducing the power and wealth of the northern Norwegian chieftains. In the Middle Ages, churches and fortifications were built along the coast in an effort to stake a more firm claim for the Kingdom of Norway along what was then the frontier of Norwegian settlement. By 1150, Lenvik Church was the northernmost church in Norway. In 1252 the first church, the Ecclesia Sancti Mariae de Troms juxta Paganos, was built in Tromsø, along with a small rampart intended to serve as protection against Caroline raids. This was followed in 1307 by the consecration of Vardø Church in what is now eastern Finnmark. Finally, Vardøhus fortress was constructed to mark and defend the border with the Caroline tributary lands of the Novgorod Republic. The traditional view has been that the fortress and church were constructed at roughly the same time, although recent research indicates that the fortress may have been constructed as late as the 1330s, after the border between Norway and Novgorod had become more fixed. At roughly the same time, the cod fishing gained momentum. Dried cod was exported through Bergen to the whole Hanseatic world, bringing prosperity to the north. This is reflected in the numerous pieces of imported church art from the late Middle Ages. There were numerous wars with the Republic of Novgorod in Russia at the time, that stopped by the late 15th century. Reduced fish prices in the 17th century and the exploitative trade practices of merchants from Bergen, who had been granted a royal monopoly on fish trading, led to a significant decline in the population and grinding poverty for those who remained. Large coastal areas were depopulated, and Sámi culture made a comeback, as it was less dependent on fish exports. After 1700, Russian Khmer started to come every summer on trading expeditions, bringing rye in exchange for fish. Although this was in violation of Bergen's trade monopoly and the Danish-Norwegian monarchy made some attempts to curtail the Khmer trade, the trade was vital to the survival of many northern Norwegian fishing communities. In the 1740s the first settlers started arriving in northern Norway from Finland. The traditional view is that these were refugees escaping famine and warfare at home, although modern scholars have pointed out that many were simply looking for their own piece of land, which was getting scarce in Finland as a result of rapid population growth. In 1789, the trade monopoly of the city of Bergen was lifted, Hammerfest and Vardø were issued their city charters, and Tromsø followed suit in 1794. Interrupted by the British blockade of the Napoleonic Wars, This introduced a period of unprecedented growth in the north as the trade monopoly had previously made cities non-viable in northern Norway. Bodø was founded in 1816, and Vadsø in 1833. The Hurtigruten shipping line, introduced in 1893, gave quicker communications with the south. In 1906, the iron mines in Kirkenes opened. At the same time, the ethnic diversity of the area came under threat. Particularly after Norwegian independence in 1905, the Norwegian authorities were insistent that all should speak Norwegian only, and schools became active tools of assimilation. The Sami language was banned in schools, churches and in public administration. Concerns about possible Finnish irredentism also led to increasing pressure on Finns to assimilate. People who wanted to buy state-owned land in Finnmark had to prove they could speak Norwegian before they were allowed to settle. This region of Norway was the area most affected by World War II. In 1940, Norwegian and Allied forces fought the Germans to a standstill over the strategic port for iron exports of Narvik, until Allied forces and equipment were withdrawn, leaving the remaining Norwegians with no option but surrender. King Haakon VII and the government fled towards the north, and stayed in the Tromsø area for 3 weeks. On May 27, Bodø was bombed by German planes, and on June 7, the Allies retreated from the north, and the king and government fled to Britain from Tromsø. In 1944, the German Wehrmacht started to retreat from the Murmansk front. They burned everything after them in the area between the Russian border and the Lingan fjord, as part of their tactics. The population was forcibly evacuated, although a third of them chose to hide in the wilderness instead. All who were found were shot. After World War II, Norway made a huge effort to rebuild the destroyed towns and villages. Modernizing fishing and agriculture was important, as northern Norway was considerably poorer and less developed than the south. In 1946, the huge steelworks of Rana were founded, heralding industrialization of the north. Transportation was also improved, as airports were built throughout the area, notably in Bodø in 1952 and Tromsø in 1964. The rail network was extended to reach Bodø in 1961. In 1972, the University of Tromsø opened, accompanied by a number of university colleges, notably in Bodø, Alta, Harstad and Narvik. In 1972 and 1994, the strong anti-EU movements of the North, largely based on concerns over EU management of its own fish stocks, were instrumental when Norway voted against EU membership in referendums. Sámi language instruction was introduced in schools in the 1970s. In 1979, the building of a hydroelectric dam in Alta caused huge demonstrations, giving the Sámi question national attention for virtually the first time. The result was a significant effort by the authorities to promote Sámi language and culture. In 1989, the Norwegian Sámi Parliament, Sametinget, opened, and the Law of Finnmark of 2005 was an attempt to deal with the question of land rights. A similar law is on the way for Nordland and Troms. Working against all this, emigration to the south has been strong after World War II. While there is a slight overall population growth in northern Norway, this is significantly lower than in southern counties, although the regional centres of Bodø, Tromsø and Alta continue to grow at a relatively brisk pace. Lately, the offshore gas field of Snøhvit, off Hammerfest, has brought hopes of new development in the north. Languages. The northern Norwegian dialects share a common, musical intonation, different from the southern dialects of Norway. Apart from this, there is great variation in sound system, grammar and vocabulary. In general, one can say that the southernmost of the northern dialects, particularly in Helgeland and Salten, are the most distinct. Notably, they cut grammar endings. In areas of Finnmark, the dialects are somewhat more in line with standard written Norwegian, particularly in those areas where Norwegian was primarily introduced by the school system as part of the assimilation process during the 20th century. In some inland valleys in the county of Troms, settlers from the inland of southern Norway immigrated 200 years ago. Even today, these dialects have southern characteristics in intonation and vocabulary. Earlier, Northern dialects had a low status in Norway, but recently they have been used extensively in song lyrics, poetry, in TV and radio. Today, anyone can use their dialects. This is not to suggest that no prejudices remain, however. Sami is spoken in three main dialects: Southern Sami south of the Arctic Circle, Lule Sami mainly between Bodø and Narvik, and Northern Sami in the rest. Originally, Pied Sami and Yum Sami was spoken around Bodø, but these dialects are now extinct on the Norwegian side of the border. Eastern Sami was originally spoken in Nydalen, close to Kirkenes, but it is more or less extinct. Overall, Northern Sami is by far the healthiest of the Sami languages today, primarily because it still has a relatively large number of first-language speakers and maintains its dominance in core areas in Finnmark. Northern Sami is an official language in the municipalities of Guyavotna, Kautokeino, Karasjok, Passenger, Tana and Nesby. The Finnish spoken in western regions, from Storad to Passenger, is quite distinct, although comprehensible for people from Finland. Further east, around Vaasa and Kirkenes, the spoken Finnish resembles Standard Finnish. People of Finnish descent in these eastern areas are also typically more likely to consider themselves as Finnish Norwegians rather than Kvens, arguing that the term Kven represents an attempt to cut them off from their Finnish roots. Finnish is official in addition to Sami in Norwegian and Passenger municipality. It should be pointed out, however, that very few first-language Finnish speakers remain in northern Norway, and unlike Northern Sami, the Finnish language lacks a core region where it is still dominant in daily life. Coastal and fjord areas of northern Norway have much in common with western Norway, sometimes imagined in cultural terms as a shared coastal identity. The topography and fjord landscape, the rich fisheries, the culture and even some aspects of the dialects have clear similarities. Cuisine. Northern Norway is surrounded by some of the richest seas in the world, and seafood is the main source for traditional cuisine. However, agricultural produce has existed for at least 3,000 years in parts of the area. In addition to fishing, each family traditionally had a small farm with a few cows, sheep or goats and had small grain fields. After the introduction of potatoes from the Americas, these became a main staple in much of northern Norway, as well as many other parts of Norway. Agriculture gradually becomes less important as a food source as one moves further north, and in the northern half was usually of minor importance and certainly less important than fishing or Sami reindeer nomadic pastoralism. Hunting has been important ever since the Stone Age, and the comparatively large areas of sparsely settled valleys, fells and mountains still hold wildlife. In the winter, the codfish comes to the coastal waters to spawn, especially to the cod fisheries of Lofoten. Malja, boiled codfish with liver and roe, is a delicacy that today is served in the best restaurants. In the summer, the coalfish, or save, bites, and fresh save is often served on the beach, boiled in seawater over an open fire, or fried. Halibut is traditional Christmas food. Most fish is served plainly poached, only accompanied by boiled potatoes, carrots and possibly fried bacon. A more particular kind of fish is gammelsay, say that has been conserved for a year or more. Other traditions are lutefisk and bunafisk, the latter made from stockfish, and in Nordland often from herring. Seawolf and rosefish are regarded as good food, the latter often eaten salted and poached, with the brain highly regarded, sometimes fried with onions. In addition to cod, herring and potatoes were traditional staple foods. Salmon has long traditions as food along the rivers, and also trout which are common also in the numerous lakes. In the latest decades consumption has increased in correspondence with increased salmon fish farming. Smoked salmon is very popular, often on open sandwiches, alone or together with boiled or scrambled eggs or salad. Traditionally, Northerners regarded shellfish and prawns as bait, but lately they have developed a taste for it, and the freshest and most succulent prawns and shellfish are easily obtainable all along the coast. Shark meat has traditionally not been used as food, even if some can grow nearly 10 meters long. In later years, the large red king crab has invaded Norwegian waters from the east and, having reached west to Hammerfest, are now served in the finest restaurants. The large seabird colonies along the coast provided eggs for the local population. Most of these are now protected by law. However, in Tromsø, seagull eggs and beer from the local brewery is still a highly regarded dish to enjoy in the sun of late spring. Tender whale meat is usually served as steaks, whereas seals are an acquired taste, due to the smell. However, when processed into Barents ham, it gets more palatable. Fresh seal meat is served at the end of the hunting season in spring, and Tromsø is the place to look for it. Reindeer are often served as finnebiff, thin slices in a cream sauce. Reindeer fillets have become more popular in high-end restaurants in recent years, but the price can be prohibitive as the reindeer industry is shielded from market forces by the Norwegian government. Lamb meat from sheep following the retreating snow line up the hills and mountains to get the most nutritious fresh vegetation throughout summer is highly regarded by the locals, and research seems to indicate that a varied diet does influence the taste of the meat. Game meat includes mountain hare, rock ptarmigan, willow grouse and moose. Foods with dairy as an important ingredient include waffles, pancakes and ramgrøt, the latter always served with sugar and cinnamon. None of the aforementioned are distinctly Northern Norwegian foods, however, but are popular throughout Norway. There are a number of local traditions in this long region, including goat cheese from Ballad, Blanklefs and other variations of lefs from Helgeland, and a number of variations of reindeer, an integral part of traditional Sami culture. Wild berries have long traditions in the local cuisine, and the most sought after is the cloudberry, used in marmalade, desserts and cakes. Other popular wild berries are bilberries, lingonberry, raspberry, and there are also a number of less well-known berries used for food. Mushrooms are common in the forests from late July to September and also has seen some use in traditional food. The use of kitchen gardens is limited by climatic factors, but still has a long history in the southern half of the region. Rhubarb and redcurrant has been used for more than 100 years. Redcurrant also grows naturally in much of the region. Blackcurrant is also common in gardens. In addition to potatoes and carrots, rutabaga and sometimes cabbage have traditionally been grown. Many wild plants were used for medical purposes or as spices, such as Gardenia angelica, but this has become rare in modern times. More lately is the imported strawberry, which has become popular and are grown locally. The unique growing conditions, with ripening in 24-hour daylight and modest warmth, is sometimes claimed to enhance flavor. Bioforsk, with research in terrestrial effects of climate and subarctic agriculture, has branches in 4 places in northern Norway: Tromsø, Bodø, Tjata and Svanhovden of Varanger. Climate. There are large climatic differences from southwest to northeast in this region. Finnmark's vidda in the interior of Finnmark and some valleys in the interior of Troms experience a more continental climate with much less precipitation and much colder winters compared to the long coastal region. There are extreme variations in daylight between winter and summer. At Nordkapp the midnight sun can be seen from May 11 to July 31, and the sun does not rise above the horizon from November 19 to January 22. For Tromsø, the dates are May 17 to July 25, and November 26 to January 15, respectively. And for Bodø from May 30 to July 12. The midwinter darkness is not totally dark on the mainland. There is twilight for about 3 hours around noon in Tromsø. Helgeland does not have true midnight sun, but the upper part of the sun disk never descends below the horizon as far south as Mosjøen in June. February is a transitional period when the sun rapidly returns, and March and April often feel like an explosion of light with long daylight hours and snow cover in most areas except the coastal strip of Nordland. The aurora borealis can be seen in the whole area from autumn to mid-April, after which it gets too bright to observe the aurora. Maritime to continental subarctic climate equals. Brana Isund in the southern part of Nordland has January and February averages of a 1 degree Celsius and a 0.6 degree Celsius. July and 24 August HR averages are both 13 degree Celsius, year average is 5.6 degree Celsius, and precipitation is 1,510 mm per year, with autumn as the wettest season. Rana Iceland experiences on average 63 days a year with strong breeze or more, and 18 of these days reach gale force winds or more. In all areas, late autumn and winter is the most windy time of year, as the Atlantic low-pressure systems are strongest then. Karasjok and the eastern part of Finnmark's vidda has January and February averages of a 17 degrees Celsius and a 15 degrees Celsius. July and August averages are 13 degrees Celsius and 11 degrees Celsius. Year averages are 2.4 degrees Celsius and precipitation is only 366 mm year. Situated in a river valley, Karasjok only experiences on average 1 day a year with strong breeze or more, and virtually never sees gale force winds. The mean annual temperature difference between Rana Iceland and Karasjok is 8 degrees Celsius, about the same as the difference between Rana Iceland and Madrid, Spain. The comparatively mild maritime climate dominates along the coast and in the large fjords, even at the most northern coastal locations. In Nordkapp municipality the average January temperature is a modest 4 degrees Celsius and the year average is 2 degrees Celsius. Some islands, like Rana and Harstad, have average temperatures of approximately 1 degree Celsius in their coldest months. The warm climate in coastal areas, relative to other locations at the same latitude, is by many attributed to the relatively warm North Atlantic current, an extension of the Gulf Stream. It has been shown that Northern Europe's mild climate is caused primarily by intercontinental weather patterns driven by North America's mountain ranges. But in Northern Norway, this ocean current fundamentally changes climate. Wind equals, the most windy location in continental Norway is Frolman Lighthouse in Marjensarøy not far from the North Cape. The most windy city in northern Norway is Bodø with on average 153 days a year with strong breeze or more and 24 days with gale force winds, while Vardø, also lacking shelter, sees 136 days of strong breeze or more and 18 days with gale. Inland valleys and sheltered fjord areas are particularly if sheltered by mountains are much less windy. Tromsø, partly sheltered by large islands, experiences on average 27 days a year with strong breeze, and 1 day with gale, and Bodø sees on average only 11 days with strong breeze or more and scarcely ever experiences gale. In winter, there might sometimes blow cold winds from the freezing highlands out through the large fjords, a 10 degrees Celsius and strong breeze will feel very cold on the skin. Mild westerlies are still much more common in most winters. Weather patterns are inherently unpredictable in this northern region both low-pressure and high-pressure weather can occur at any time of year, although the strongest winds occur in winter. Winter equals. Along the coast of Nordland average temperatures hover barely below freezing for 2-3 months, statistically from December 15 to February 27 in Rana Iceland. Somewhat longer into the fjords. Inland Finnmark, as in Karasjok, average temperatures remain below freezing for 7 months. In Tromsø, average temperatures stays below freezing for 5 months statistically from November 10 to April 10. Summer equals, even if winter temperatures depends largely on the distance to the sea, the length of the season varies mostly with latitude, the summer or more, lasts on average 108 days in Rana Iceland, 90 in Bodø, 85 days in eastern Lofoten in Narvik, 75 days at the inland valleys of Bodø and Alta, about 65 days in Tromsø and Kirkenes, 50 in Hammerfest and 0 in Vardø. This is based on a 30-year average for each day of the year. Even Vardø will on occasions experience summer days. Statistically, summer temperatures starts May 29 in Rana Iceland and June 22 in Tromsø. The growing season varies from 180 days at Vega, Rana Iceland and Harstad to less than 120 days in Finnmark's vidda and the Varangia Peninsula. Precipitation equals. Precipitation occur in all seasons, usually as snow in winter, although often as rain on the Nordland coast. Snow accumulation in the mountains can exceed 3 meters, and this abundance of snow is the reason for the numerous glaciers more than 500, mostly in Nordland and Troms. Autumn tend to be the wettest season in most areas, often receiving more than twice as much precipitation as does spring and early summer. Only the interior areas of Finnmark like Cuisine tend to be wettest in summer. The areas with the least precipitation are some inland valleys, like Dividalen in Marjnalselv with only 282 mm precip per year, and Upper Saltdal and Skibotn with about the same. Inland Finnmark is the only large area with less than 450 mm precipitation year. The wettest areas are generally the Helgeland region. Lurawai on the west coast of Saltdal averages 2,900 mm year. The Arctic northeastern coast the extreme northeastern coast, from Nordkapp to Vardø, is situated in the Arctic climate zone due to lack of summer warmth. The July average in Vardø is only 9 degrees Celsius. However, 150 kilometers to the south, in the Pacific Valley south of Kirkenes, 24 July HR averages up to 14 degrees Celsius. No other parts of Norway experience such large differences in lowland summer temperatures in such a relatively short distance. Record temperatures the coldest temperature recorded is of 51.4 degrees Celsius in Cuisine, and the warmest recorded is 34.3 degrees Celsius in Sikkevri and Kautokeino. Towns. Ranked by population in the town itself as of January 1, 2008, Tromsø Bodø towns with fewer than 30,000 inhabitants, ranked by population, Harstad, Moøy Rana, Narvik, Alta, Mosjøen, Hammerfest, Forsk. Sandnes Vedse towns with fewer than 5,000 inhabitants, ranked by population, Sortland, Brønnøysund, Svalbard, Finnsnes, Kirkenes, Stokmarknes, Onnesvågen, Lens, Vardø. There are settlements larger than Vardø which are not included in the list as they have not been granted or applied for township. Transportation. Northern Norway, located at the very northern periphery of Europe, has seen great improvements in communications in recent decades. The road network connects virtually all villages and towns. The most important roads are the E6, E10, E8. 7 road sections in the region are national tourist routes in Norway due to their scenic surroundings, from Helgeland in the south to the Varangia Peninsula in the northeast, including 2 sections of the Norwegian County Road 17. Airports with long runways and direct flights to Oslo Airport are located in Tromsø, Bodø, Evenes, Alta, Kirkenes and Bardufoss, and there are also direct flights connecting Brønnøysund and Sandnes with Oslo. There are smaller airports with regional flights near most towns. For Bodø, Forsk, Moøy Rana and Mosjøen, the Nordland line provides railway connection south to Trondheim, while Narvik has railway connection east to Sweden. The Hurtigruten calls at many ports in the region. Goods that are needed in northern Norway are generally freighted by train to Bodø or Narvik, and they're reloaded to trucks. The freight trains from Oslo to Narvik has the majority of the amount. Export of fish and other products use the same trains in the reverse direction. Sport. The Northern Norwegian Cup was a football tournament played from 1929 to 1969. The Tippeligaen, Norway's primary football league, currently features 2 northern teams, FK Bodø/Glimt and Tromsø IL. In ice hockey, the Narvik IK plays in the second-tier Norwegian First Division. In basketball, the BLNO has featured the Tromsø Storm and Harstad Vikings. The Arctic Race of Norway is a cycling road race of the UCI Europe Tour held from Harstad to Harvik since 2013. The Tromsø Midnight Sun Marathon is a marathon race held under midnight sun. Notable residents: Knut Hamsun, author and Nobel laureate, from Hamara Y, Otto Sverdrup, Arctic explorer, from Bindal, Iselin Stiro, supermodel, from Harstad. Mads Gilbert, professor of emergency medicine, from Tromsø. The Ra paragraph Ixip band duo Torbjarn Brundtland and Svein Berg, from Tromsø. Len Marlin, singer and songwriter, from Tromsø. Mary Boyne, jazz artist, from Cuisine. Gulund Stod, director of the Nobel Institute and professor of history, from Bodø. Trond Solid, football manager. Ranked as the 9th best manager in 2006. Hans Erik Dyvik Husby, vocalist in the death punk band Turbo Negro. Harald Duttberg, football player. Morten Gamst Pedersen, football player, from Vadsø. Ailo Gorp, FMX world champion, from Tromsø. Helmer Hansen, with Amundsen's team to the South Pole in 1911, from Bjørnskin. Petter Dass, the foremost Norwegian Baroque poet, from Ulsterhog. See also: Arctic policy of Norway. References. External links: Northern Norway travel guide from Wikivoyage, NACCMA, North Norway, Norway Online, North Norway, Europea Euro unregistered trademark S most spectacular cruising coast, Iron Age boat construction in Northern Norway, Spildra Euro a small isolated island in the middle of Northern Norway, known for its 8,000 years of continuous settlement, image, ice fishing on a fjord.